everybody, and welcome to Training Thursday, a dash early today, but still full of amazing goodness. So today I wanted to start the conversation about finding your niche. I know we've had so many questions about it in the hub, and it's one of the ones that I get emailed about all the time. I'm just starting out. How can I find my niche? I've been in, I've been in practice for ages, and I'm a general practitioner. I don't know how to get this marketing idea when I have to find my niche. So I thought we would start the conversation today because it is a relatively big conversation on one side, and then it's a super easy conversation on the other side. But I thought it would, happen that we could have this conversation. Hey, Emily. Hey, Christina. Christina, are you finding your niche, or do you need help to hear me? Cool. Nice to see you, lovely. I'm sure you'll have a bit to contribute to this conversation as well. And that's one that we as mentors get a lot of questions about. And I really think that it comes from all different angles. And it's, like I was saying, it can be super simple. Like, in essence, it's just picking one thing and one person, right? So it really is super simple. But then there's all this other stuff that goes with it. And I really wanted to open up the conversation and start with the scientific method. I'm going to do 3 parts to this finding your niche. Number 1 today is the scientific method of finding your niche. Hey, Kirsten, nice to see you too. All right. So scientific method is, by definition, a 17th century notion, which not a lot of us really kick off with, but a method or procedure, a systematic observation, measurement, experiment, and the formulation, testing, and modification of a hypothesis. So back in the day, I was a scientist. I worked in a morgue. I did cancer research. I was a researcher for another cancer laboratory. I also was doing research for pathology before I got into pathology as an actual kind of field of research. So I was really keen on wanting to know how everything worked. And the only way to know how everything works is to find one thing and find out how it works. But you only can find one thing of the one thing and how it works to actually create a scientific hypothesis and then test whether or not that is true. Hypothesis is an idea. It's an idea where it might come from a thought that you might have had. It might come from an observation you've already made and you want to grow on that. But this is the thing about scientific method as applied to business. You might have had a thought that you'd like to help a particular type of symptomology, a particular type of person. You might have had a thought, I'd love to help this particular type. And a hypothesis is, I could help these particular types of people, right? Scientific method says you can only do one thing, right? And that with the one thing, you are then only testing one thing of that. Now, I started my master's, bizarrely enough. I started my master's and I didn't follow through with my master's because I was so excited about so many aspects of what I was studying. And it was, at the time, it was actually live blood analysis. I was checking out, and again, you can't just create a scientific research on the whole field of live blood analysis. So I had to pick one cell, one sort of cell. So I picked lymphocytes. And then of those, I had to pick one differentiating feature of those to test my hypothesis as to whether or not we were measuring something or other. So can you see how being a generalist and wanting to serve everybody and testing all of the different types of conditions out there or people out there isn't going to really get you a very specific result when it comes to using scientific method for niching. Hey, Christine, nice to see Christine Jane. It's nice to see you on lunch. Awesome. And Anita. So yeah, so I started my master's on that. And because again, I'm like so interested in all of the different facets, I realized that I couldn't keep going on with just this tiny little way of focusing my attention. Now, the flip side to that is in business, when we do all the generalized things, we can't get a specific result. It's really hard to find how we can get a specific result. And so it's hard to find how we can test our hypothesis of whether or not we are serving one particular person unless we start to market to one particular person or one particular disease state or symptomology. And so if we are doing that and we are choosing one path, then we have to go through with, like it says, systematic observation, right? And then you've got to go through the background research of that particular person, hypothesis on that person or that symptomology. So what it looks like is my kids are home, but when it comes to what you want to who you would like, who you've got an idea of, who you want to serve, it's a hypothesis whether or not that person's going to work for you. So don't think, oh, I'm going to serve everybody. And what happens when you go, oh, I'm going to serve everybody, is you don't get a specific result and you can't test it. It's the same as when I was doing, oh, I want to do all of the blood cells. Well, I can't get a specific result whether or not part of this works or part of it doesn't, because I haven't actually picked one. So when we pick one, then we have an opportunity to test it. We go and get background research on all of that. And when I was doing my master's, when I began my unfinished master's, I did so much, like I did a full lit review and got all of the bits and pieces to do with what I was studying. So I was studying lymphocytes, and so I got all of the literature reviews on how that has been used before. The same thing happens for when you have a hypothesis. Okay, say I want to help burnt out mums. That used to be my thing as well, burnt out mums. So I have researched burnt out mums like you wouldn't believe. I researched them inside and out. I researched what they like, what they didn't like, where they were on Facebook, where they were, what they were Googling, what they said to their friends, what they said to themselves late at night, what was going on inside their heads, their biggest, most hardcore challenge, what they feared the most, and what really inspired them to change things, and what they really wanted out of their health and their well-being, and what was happening in most of their bodies that they were either not happy about or that they wanted or needed to change. Now, these are a whole bunch of stuff, and I've got a resources on tammyguest.com/resources. We've got an ideal client little download, and you can really hone in on it there. But you've got to do your background research. So finding and utilizing it as a hypothesis, oh, I want to help this particular person. You then have to really get into their boots and get into their world and essentially do a literature review on all of the different places and spaces that they have either bought things before to do with their health or their well-being, or they've looked up things before to do with their health and their well-being. Then you've got to create an experiment. Now, this is my most fun part of how to find your niche. It is an experiment. It's not the be all and end all. Like for some of you guys, and for me, guarantee it, the first 6 months I heard this, I was so resistant to it. I was like, no, I want to help everybody. Everyone in the world can help, my natural health skills can help everybody in the world. And that's fine, except I can't speak to everybody in the world. And what you're doing when you are looking into a niche is you're speaking to one particular person and you're giving them a spotlight. You're looking at one particular hypothesis and you're giving it a spotlight. Now, there's going to be ambient light around there that's going to fall on other people. Those people don't just magically disappear. You're still going to get it. When I was doing my literature review, I've still found things on lymphocytes in cancer and lymphocytes in, other testing modalities, and lymphocytes in, and I saw all of this other stuff. But I was looking just at them. So then I could focus my attention and look at that. It's the same thing with your niche. You focus your attention there, and there's still going to be other mums that are going to come into your world. There's still going to be other mums and their partners and their families and their kids. They're all still going to get in there. It's not like they just disappear, and because it's set in stone and concrete, they can't come to you anymore. It doesn't work like that. And it's one of our biggest fears, especially when we're first starting out, that if we niche, no one will come. And that's not the case. When we niche, we really get the people that we truly are experimenting on whether we can help them or not. And we're seeing how we can help them the best and what gives the best results for this particular group of people. And then once the experiment's through, you might find something. Now, this is the same case with scientific method. Scientific method, you have your hypothesis, you do your background research, and then you go in and you do your experiment. And you have to go into the experiment not expecting an outcome. You have to be really open-minded about whether or not it's going to work. Of course you want it to work because you set a hypothesis out that this particular thing will work. But this is the thing about science, right? And this is the thing about choosing what you want to niche in. And my dog's home as well as my kids. All right, so the other thing is you've got to go in it with an open mind, because sometimes these things don't work. So when I was back in cancer research, we were doing some chemotherapeutic drug reactions on the CD35, which is a protein on the edge of a colon cancer. Totally geeking out here. Carla, you'll know what I'm talking about. So we were doing this very specific test on one protein on the outside of a cell, right? One protein on the outside of one different type of cell line, not like all the cells in your body, one different cell. And it was one type of cancer cell line. And when we were doing that, we were in there testing one particular thing and seeing whether or not it switched it on or switched it off. It was as simple as that. We did that for about a month with a whole bunch and replicated it. We had enough experiments to show that that didn't work. So for a whole month, we tested and tested and tested and tested and tested. We grew all these cells and then we tested them all and they didn't die. And so that particular chemotherapeutic agent didn't work. But we had a hypothesis that it did work. But we had to go into it with the idea that maybe this will work. So if we apply the same kind of process to you going, I'm going to experiment with serving. Right? Because as soon as you say, I serve, all of a sudden you think that nobody else is going to come and see you. So I'm going to experiment with serving a whole bunch of amazing burnt out mums that really need my help, right? And so you go in and you research them, and then you see whether or not this particular advertisement will work, or this particular blog post will work to get them in, or this particular story that you share on your Facebook page will work, or this particular, and you start having the conversation and be open that some of these things won't work. Maybe if you say, share an inspirational quote for your tribe of mums, that might be really helpful. Maybe for your tribe of mums, recipes might be helpful. So you're sharing in a way and seeing what result you get back. You don't do that once and then go, mums aren't for me, I'm going to be a generalist again. Mums aren't for me, there's a whole bunch of men out there that I can help. So you don't do just one blog post. You don't do just one Facebook page, post. It's like a series of experiments to see which angle and what things can work to really open up that mum to go, oh my goodness, that hit me. That was exactly what I needed to hear on the medium, on the platform I needed to hear it, that I'm going to either post a comment, like it, or book in with you. So that experiment, you need to know whether or not that's working or not, and you need to know it over time. And it needs to be replicatable. That's what scientific method is about. It needs to be replicatable. Replicate, and then you can get it published. But when you're doing it with your peeps, you're starting to have a conversation and you're going to see whether or not the result comes back, and the result comes back, and the result comes back. So minimum, like big companies do this over a whole year. But when you're just starting out, the minimum you want to be doing this for is at least a month. So if you're going to focus on one particular symptomology, say, like I was saying, it might be burnt out mums, it might be clients with IBS. Then for a whole month, you put out all of your information about IBS. You put out a workshop about IBS. You put out maybe a webinar about it. You put out the most recent research about it. You talk about it in your Instagram posts. You put up pictures and helpful things that you've been exploring. You put up inspirational things. You put up funny things about having the farts. Like, but you do it for a whole month. And then as you get, if you're watching and you're a little bit more inclined and you're a bit further on in business, then I'd suggest you do it for 3 months. A quarter is a really good amount of time in a marketing strategy to really see what kind of result you get. Now, we do this all the time with our clients, right? You're not going to tell your client, okay, try that probiotic for 1 day and come tell me what happens. It doesn't work like that, right? It takes time for these experiments to reap the benefits of whether or not they worked. And then once you've applied that scientific method, once you've applied that experiment, you're then measuring the result. This is the bit that takes a little bit of time to understand, but measuring the result when it comes to your marketing, measuring the result when it comes to niching, is coming from lots of different angles in your business. Sometimes it's how many hits you get on your website. So you have to start exploring what type of hit rate and click rate you have on your website. If you haven't explored that before, go and YouTube it. You'll be able to find something depending on what platform you're using for your website, and you'll be able to see how many visits you've got and how long they stay there. Google Analytics does an amazing job of that, and if you haven't got that on your website, you might want to check that out. Other measuring tools. You have the background of Facebook has amazing measuring tools. They're incredible at it. They give you lots and lots of amazing data on it. And so you want to get into the background of in the back end of your business page, and it has insights. Click on that and you'll be able to see what time of day people are clicking on there, what posts are going to get the most engagement, what time of the day they've got the most engagement. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening in there that could be really beneficial for you to get the measurements on whether or not that particular niche is working for you. Then you want to test it, see whether or not that's working with something a little bit bigger. So something like a workshop, something like a webinar. You might want to invite them to something a little bit different to what you have. And then you've got a full round circle of the scientific method where you have had your hypothesis, then you've created a background research and found out, then you've given it a good experiment time, then you've measured it, got some data and numbers, and then you can either go, yes, that's working, or I need to pivot and change. That's the cool thing about how scientific method and entrepreneurship cross over. You can pivot and change, and modify is the word, modification of hypothesis. You can modify it and go, actually, I still do want to help women, but I want to help them with IBS instead of their stress. And then you modify and change, and then you go back through, okay, what are they talking about with IBS? What are they talking about? And you're modifying and changing, and then you're doing another experiment, and then modifying and changing. So this is a cool thing. The hypothesis itself, or the niche itself, is usually inside you. We're going to talk about that next time, that it's usually somewhere from your past, either a story that you've been involved in someone else's life, or a story of your own in your life. But it'll be coming through to niggle at you as to whether or not that's your niche. But then it's about experimenting. So my invitation to you at the end of all of this is pick one. Pick one niggling thing and see what the experiment gives you over a month. See how you can do your research and appear in the places for that particular person. Get the measurements, lean in. I know numbers can be, a little bit icky for us prackies, but lean in, get the measurements, and then modify and see what happens as a result. It's an amazing thing to be super curious. I love applying things and experimenting with stuff. It's one of my favorite entrepreneurial tools. And I think it can be really beneficial for all of you guys who are out there going, but I don't know who my niche is, so therefore I'll just keep talking to everybody. And then because it's diluted, it's a lot like, here's another chemical way of describing it. If you've got one little message, and it's like a shot of cordial. You pour your shot of cordial into a large cup. It's nice and concentrated if it's for one person, right? But if it's for more people, then you've got to dilute it down with some water. And then we have a diluted cordial, which is okay, but it's not like the shot of cordial, right? And then if you want to keep talking to other people and you make it even more generalized, you're diluting it even more. And then you're adding a whole bunch of people on top, and then all of your message gets so dilute that who wants that cordial in the first place? We want like hardcore, beautiful elderberry yumminess that's as concentrated as it can be and directed as it can be versus diluted in a whole sea of water. So instead of diluting your message, hone in on it and have an experiment to see whether or not it gets the benefits. All right, hopefully this was helpful. And if it is, please share it, or please, continue this conversation with some of your Praccie friends and see how this is playing out in your business, or how you can take on even one little bit of what I was talking about and see if you can create your own experiment. And if you're watching this on the replay on YouTube, because all of these replays go on YouTube, go and subscribe to make sure that you don't miss out on any of them. And I will catch you in the next Training Thursday, where we're going to have a conversation about where in your past is affecting your niche and how it can be the absolute treasure trove for really honing in on who you're truly here to help. All right, I'll catch you in the next vid. See ya.